Welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Our theme for 2025 is the future of work. Meaning is the new money. In a world shaped by rapid innovation and constant change, the pursuit of purpose and impact has never been more important. I'm Dr. John Dentico, your host, bringing over 30 years of experience in leadership, strategic thinking, and purpose-driven innovation. Here, we tackle the pressing challenges of our time, from the rise of artificial intelligence to the growing need for meaning in the workplace. Together, we'll uncover how leaders can ethically integrate AI to enhance decision-making and keep humanity at the heart of their organizations. Remember, amidst all the technological advancements, in the end, it's always about the people. This podcast is your resource for actionable tools, thought-provoking discussions, and inspiring stories. It's time to go beyond leadership development and focus on leadership impact, creating workplaces where people thrive, innovation flourishes, and meaning truly becomes the new currency. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Now, let's throttle up and dive into today's episode.
Hello again and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. This is your host, Dr. John Dentico. With me today is Kimberly Collins, a true multihyphenate whose work spans business, psychology, music, philanthropy, and personal development. She's an author, blogger, entrepreneur, and certified coach in both the Enneagram and MBTI systems. Kimberly is also the co-owner of Collins Orthodontics and The Donut, a purpose-driven venture that helps fund free orthodontic care for pediatric cancer survivors. How spectacular is that? With years of hands-on leadership experience and a deep understanding of typology systems, Kimberly brings a rare combination of heart, strategy, and self-awareness to everything she does. Whether she's coaching executives, managing teams, or creating spaces for emotional growth, her mission is clear: to help people lead with clarity, build stronger relationships, and grow into the best version of themselves. Get ready for a conversation that blends real-world leadership with deep psychological insight and maybe a few sweet surprises along the way. I am truly pleased and overwhelmingly delighted to welcome her here this morning. Good morning, Kimberly. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. How are you?
I am peachy. Things are good. Good. Let me start by asking you this question I've been using on my podcast this year, and that is, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? And what were some of the influences in your early life?
Absolutely. So I grew up in Montana to a fantastic family of two parents and two sisters, and they greatly influenced my journey in both music as well as in these typology systems. So grew up with some very musical sisters, and that's actually my training, is I am a professional musician. And I was very interested always in personality systems because my dad was a manager of people and he loved the MBTI system. I have so many memories of in the car on the way to Yellowstone taking the MBTI test from the book, figuring out what my sisters, my mom and my dad were, and just getting a kick out of listening to all the information we could get about each other from that. So having that influence from my dad, it influenced me when I had my own team and I was experiencing significant burnout in my own life from managing a team, having 3 little people at home, and doing the business tasks required of me. And I was experiencing all this burnout. And I had a friend get me into the Enneagram, which is another type of typology system that helps us look at the motivations behind a lot of our behaviors. Knowing how helpful it was for my dad to know the MBTI in his own work, I knew that if I took the time to dive into it and learned more about myself, it could really help me in my own management and leadership style.
Yeah, good. I'm very familiar with the MBTI. I've taken it myself. I am a ENFJ according to MBTI. But I always tell people there's a caution here. You cannot put people in a box. These are
Absolutely.
preferences. They prefer this thing. Doesn't mean they can't do the other things. Be introverted at time. In fact, I found that one of the most interesting aspects about MBTI is when the E becomes in conflict with the N. I think I'm saying that right. So a person that's intuitive, at the same time, the intuitive becomes in conflict with the judgmental side. So there's this tussle, if you will,
Yeah.
from being intuitive and gauging the outer world almost as though you had antennas on the top of your head to making judgments about certain things. I'd love to get your reflection on that.
Absolutely. And like you said, this is not about putting people in boxes or saying you can never move outside of these preferences. It's saying, what's your slipstream? Where do you work the best? And if you had the chance to choose that, not that they're incapable of working outside of their preferences. In fact, we have many, many people who are able to be extroverted when they need to be, even though they prefer a more introverted type of environment to work in. And like you said, taking in information through their senses versus their intuition. People can work outside of this all the time. What is going to help you work in your slipstream if it applies to you? And of course, MBTI has developed even more since those first books came out to include even more facets underneath each of those large 4 categories. We can have extroverted introverts or elements of that introversion that can be extroverted. It's more just about trying to bring elements of yourself that are maybe in your blind spot to the center so that you can understand yourself better, understand your teammates better or your relationships better, and work more harmoniously with yourself and others. But it's not about stereotyping or putting yourself in a box or others in a box. It's about understanding so that you can make better decisions for yourself.
I'll tell you a funny story. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a presentation, and the guy who was giving the presentation, very technical oriented, right? But definitely, this guy was over the edge eye, right? And very introverted. He begins the presentation with this line: "I'm not very good in social situations." And I thought to myself, well, why did they let you up here to give this presentation? And you could just see he just was so drawn to the charts on his PowerPoint slides that his ability to communicate was lost. Having some pretty decent familiarization with MBTI, it's one of those things you go, I know what he is. That's an I guy right there.
Yeah, right.
So it's pretty funny. Anyway,
Yeah,
let me move on. I'd love to ask you a couple more questions. Your business, the Donut, supports pediatric cancer survivors in such a meaningful way. How did that idea come to life, and what have you learned about purpose-driven entrepreneurship through it?
Absolutely. So the Donut came to be because we are in Rochester, Minnesota, the home of Mayo Clinic. And so Mayo Clinic has this large draw to people who need medical care. And actually, a lot of the residents and people who live here have either had care at Mayo Clinic or are drawn here again because that was a need in their lives. So there was, in the orthodontic practice, we were finding that a lot of people were coming in with this background, children who had fought cancer so courageously and are now having to experience these medical bills from beating childhood cancer and finding that a lot of times braces weren't something that their family was going to be able to afford. It's many times, especially insurance-wise, considered elective care. And yet, these children have experienced so much. And so many times what we were hearing is, I just want to be normal. I just want to be like the other kids in my class. Braces to them was almost like a signifier of this thing that could be normalizing for them, that they could have that beautiful smile that they could be proud of. The co-founder and I developed this program to try to give back to the community in a meaningful way. It was not only a way for us to give back, because a lot of times businesses and communities give back in lots of other ways, sponsoring sports team. But this was something that could not only get our hearts in to promoting it, as well as feeling meaningfulness and purpose. The team could rally behind this program that was supporting kids in such a tangible, meaningful way. A lot of times I feel like we give money and we don't really see the positive effect, but watching one of our shark patients come in and get the news that you're cleared by your doctor, you're cleared by your dentist, and we'd like to give this to you for free, and watching that relief is so meaningful that it really rallied all of us around feeling that this business doesn't just support great smiles for people who can afford it, but for people who maybe couldn't, and this is life-changing. So very, very meaningful.
Yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of tears in parents' eyes when you make that donation to them and see the smile on their child's face. I mean, it can never be replaced by anything. So God bless you. What you guys are doing there is just absolutely fantastic. No question about it. I want to move on, if I can, to another question. And that is, we often talk about emotional intelligence as a soft skill, but you argue it's central to performance. What are some ways leaders can practically build emotional intelligence, especially under pressure?
Absolutely. Emotional intelligence sometimes gets put to the side as this soft skill. And really, it's our cognitive intelligence, our skill, is what gets us in the door. And then our emotional intelligence is frequently our ceiling for growth in any kind of organization. There's more emphasis being put on emotional intelligence in general, especially in leadership and large corporations. Many times leaders are having to go through 360 evaluations, not only personality testing, but coaching, as well as interviewing their colleagues and subordinates to see what kind of leader this person is and what kind of improvement they need to make before they can grow. It is considered one of those skills that comes after those technical skills of your job, but they are becoming the ceiling for growth. As far as improving emotional intelligence, I like to break it down into its 4 components so we can talk about it less in that general term. Emotional intelligence was brought to the mainstream by Daniel Goleman in the 90s, and he broke it down into self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and social management. By improving any of these components, we're improving our emotional intelligence. When I work with my clients, of course, I always want to start with self-awareness, because that is that bottom rung, that base of the pyramid for which everything else can grow from. So improving our self-awareness. Who am I? How do I show up to the table? How do I react under pressure? Do I have some kind of trigger response to certain scenarios? And how can I manage myself better so that I can influence my team better and have a more harmonious workplace?
Yeah, I'll tell you, for me, empathy is really Goleman's main message. All of it is swept up in empathy. And I can't tell you how many times I've had people on my podcast and we talk about empathy and we talk about authenticity, show up, be the real person, that kind of thing. One of the things I'm zeroing in on in my own work is what I call the ability to scale leadership. Let me see if I can articulate this. When we talk about leadership, okay, the vast majority of conversations are about one person, the leader. Okay. The leader, if we're lucky, is authentic and has empathy. Okay. We hope to amass great understanding of and work capability within our team. Our team is benefiting from the leader as the person bestowing almost authenticity and empathy on us. In that sense, empathy and authenticity, and I'm going to add trust to that as well, become that individual's traits. You could call them a trait. I think they're values. And the reason I think they're values is because what I'm working on now is trying to get people to understand that what you really want is not that the leader alone has these capabilities, but the team enjoys a sense of authenticity with each other, of empathy with each other, of trust with each other, and the ability to do that, especially where each one of these individuals may now be AI augmented. Okay. So they've got at their fingertips knowledge and information beyond anyone's wildest imagination. So the idea being that if you have a team of 10 or 15 people, if the leader leaves, it doesn't go out the door with him or her. The idea being that when a new leader shows up, they have to become part of the dynamic that embodies authenticity, empathy, and trust. How do you feel about that idea?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like you're really nailing the idea of a cohesive team is not only the leader emulating and modeling these authenticity, empathy, trust, but that it is being adopted and shared among team members. Because you're absolutely right. That leader can leave. And if the team is so reliant on that leader, just deflates. Not to mention, even when the leader is there, there's only so much they can do for that team. But I do believe there's a contagiousness to authenticity and empathy and trust. And that's why it's so important for the leader to be showing that. I agree that the next step is to be encouraging that development within the team, because each of us are leaders in our own right, even if it's just among colleagues, at home, in relationships, or in family dynamic. We all are leaders in our own respect. So being able to develop those qualities are going to be beneficial regardless of if we have the title of leader or not.
Yeah, my catchphrase is leadership is what people do together.
Yeah.
The idea that one person, especially in this world that we live in now, where, in fact, I just this morning posted a newsletter on LinkedIn titled "Followership is Dying," and here's the statistics to prove it. So, and tomorrow I'm going to go and publish a piece on the remedy for that. In 1997, I read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. That completely changed my life because all of a sudden I felt like someone handed me a golden key and I unlocked the box, and inside the box was meaning.
Yeah.
Meaning is the single greatest motivation factor on the planet from where I sit.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to matter. Everybody wants their work to matter. People want to have a level of control and autonomy over their own destinies, or as I like to say, become masters of their own fate. I think you really start to strike gold. In my own simulation work and the work that I've done in creating the leadership simulation, I will tell you that it runs on two things: ambiguity and empathy. And the way I get people to actually make the shift is you put them into a job they would not have. Let them role play someone else. You take powerful people, put them in powerless positions, and take powerless people and put them in powerful roles. And for me, cross-training is one of the best ways to build empathy. I'd love to get any perspective you have in those thoughts.
Absolutely. I love that piece of putting somebody in a different position, because we can assume we could do something better, or maybe we assume malintent for mistakes or miscommunication coming from a different position, when in reality, we put ourselves in those same shoes and realize this is hard. They are likely doing the best they can. How can I support that better in what I am doing? And I'm a big believer in cross-training, because there's nothing like struggling in somebody else's shoes to develop empathy for what they are going through.
Yeah, I think it's the best way. You can talk about all these different kinds of documents you can give people and stuff. Rate yourself and do this. Great. And then they're doing their best. I'm sure they're all trying to answer the questions. But give them an hour walking in somebody else's shoes and the lights start to come on. One of the other things I've been talking about lately is this idea of the dramatic change in the way we look at leaders. For years, we've looked at leaders as those with the biggest bullhorns having all the information. They have the knowledge. And all they have to do is put the bullhorn up and project. But now we live in a society where ambiguity and doubt reigns supreme. It's everywhere. But the beauty of it is that if you embrace doubt and you embrace ambiguity, you actually kick the door open to collaboration, to real collaboration. People don't have the answers. We have to figure it out together. How are you going to do this? I don't know. Maybe let's work together. The leadership model that I started developing over 30 years ago has one premise, and that premise is contribution. Here, we have a problem. Anybody got any ideas? Anybody want to talk? Open it up. So it's very interesting to see how this shift is starting to happen. I think empathy and authenticity have to become value, and trust become values inside the organizational grouping so that it lives on, whether the leader's there or not. Very interesting. Any final thoughts you have on that?
The collaboration component of your leadership model, that it's absolutely true that less is being put on the leader to know everything, or at least less should be in a successful organization, and more of, look at these incredibly talented people who are around me. What can I tap out of their skill set, and how can we fix this together? And it's that idea of being on the same side of the table, looking at the problem all together, figuring this out with all of our skill sets together is not only just a really beautiful way of going about your workday or in your relationships, but probably the most effective as well.
Yeah, I'm hoping that leaders will understand that they have to make people understand that they matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
They really matter. The unknown element here, or the known and unknown element in the same thing, is how AI will influence this, because you and I and millions of people now have at our fingertips incredible capabilities. So it's amazing to see how the reels of this movie play out.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you this. You wear many hats, right? Author, business owner, coach, philanthropist. How do these roles inform and reinforce one another in your day-to-day life and leadership philosophy? How do you draw from these different things to inform your life?
That's a really great question. And I guess I would say that they all tap into different parts of me. And I feel like there's an element of refueling, that the musician part of me is bringing that right side brain and helping refuel my energy and creativity in my own business and authorship. And then these more left side brains, they help direct goals and whatnot for musicianship. But all of them are parts of me. And when I'm able to use all parts of this, that's the best kind of day for myself. Learning and being able to apply this to my own leadership and coaching, as well as being able to tap into the more creative aspects of myself. This is me being more of a well-rounded person. I like to, when I'm working with my clients, like to help them find, how do you feel more well-rounded? And I like to talk about that because I think a lot of times we become so fixated on one aspect of ourselves that we become rigid in our identities. When we feel those natural ups and downs of our work life, our relationships, our skill sets, we start to feel unsafe. We start to feel disconnected from who we really are. When we can get a more broad scope of who we actually are. We are friends, we are family members, we are leaders, but we're also interested in birds or whatever it is. These are all aspects of ourselves that help us be more resilient in those natural ups and downs. So bringing in different aspects is a huge part of my coaching practice, helping people bring more joy into their lives. It's not just in these very defined roles that can feel very rigid and not strong.
Yeah, I think resilience is key. How you develop. I think music helps in resilience in a great deal. The best one-liner I've ever heard about music, I love music, but one of the best one-liners I've ever heard was, the first time I heard music, I knew there was a God.
Oh,
It's spellbinding. It's one of those you just go, doesn't take a lot of words to say it. It's a beautiful thing. Reflection is important. I think you have to be able to take a step back and say, whether you're sitting on the porch, going for a walk, whatever it might be, just watching people come and go. And you need that time to reflect. Solitude is a beautiful thing when you can get your hands on it.
yeah, right.
Because it gives you that time to take a breath. Let me ask you this. and this may be a little bit redundant, if you had to design the ultimate values-aligned workspace, what are 3 elements that would absolutely have to be present and why?
Is it a fantastic question? I actually think that we did touch on a lot of those values. The why behind it for me is authenticity, empathy, trust. I would add purpose or meaning to that as well, that there's something that connects us. My only hesitation adding meaning is that sometimes team members may look to the leader to give them meaning when it's a collaborative process. The leader can say, this is what the organization is working toward. Join us in this meeting. But the individual also needs to say, this aligns with my purpose and I'm going to join into that. I do see that as the one drawback is that sometimes team members look to the leader to instill that when really it's a collaborative process. So again, coming to that collaboration, which might be another value that I would add to that. And what I would say that these values, I would add that these values being so important for the team because it requires something of the leaders. They know who they are so that they can show up with authenticity. If we don't know who we are, we're just playing on habits and habitual responses, reacting and not responding. Knowing who we are, I'm an introverted person and I don't like to be totally available to my team 100% of the time. So I'm going to know that about myself and build a life that fits in my slipstream so I can show up the best for my team. So that's why I think authenticity is so important. The empathy is knowing who you're working with. What are these personalities I'm working with? Oh, I've got an ESFJ with an ESFP. That's going to look totally different. How they complete those tasks. And if I know that about them, I can have empathy for the struggles that each of them are going to go through. It might not change the ultimate outcome of what we need to accomplish, but it is going to change my attitude towards it. The trust requires that we have psychological safety in the team, that people are able to make mistakes. They're able to voice their opinions, be themselves around me, and the leaders are able to hold that space for whatever comes up in themselves so that they're building that trust. Collaboration is a byproduct of good trust. Being able to create a workplace where everybody is bringing their full skill set to the table. What amazing accomplishments can happen from that type of environment. So I would say probably what we just talked on, but maybe add meaning and collaboration to that. But really why I like those values, because it requires a thoughtful process on what each of those values mean in our lives.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I've had a lot of conversations about purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Purpose is so very important. I'll tell you an interesting story. For years, I am fixated now. I'm like a zealot when it comes to talking about mission statements.
Mm-hmm.
Because for years, I didn't want to talk about mission statements because I got sick and tired. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you go into an organization, so you have a mission statement.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got one of those.
Yeah.
Where is it? Oh, it's over there. Do you live it? Do you breathe it? Do you do it every day? Oh, it just hangs on the wall every day. And I just said, I'm done here. I can't do this anymore. Then I realized one of the great things I call the big three, number one of the big three, is that people want to work for an organization whose values align with their own.
Mm.
They're looking for a values connection. You got to talk about mission statements because in a mission statement, which I only give people one sentence, that's just all you get. You have to articulate what your values are so that the people who may join you say, hey, you know what? There's a match here. I want to be with these people. And purpose and mission is the same word, basically. So that's absolutely important. A few weeks ago, I was speaking to the National Workforce Development Conference here in Virginia Beach. And I said to people who were looking for jobs, you know, who might be job seekers, if you come to a mission statement and it's 7 paragraphs, move on.
Right.
These people are going to frustrate you. They're going to make you crazy because they don't even know who they are. They see a mission statement as only something that appeals to the outside world. And yes, it's connected to branding. Okay, I get that. But more than that, it's the galvanizing spirit for the people inside the organization. So I absolutely agree. You got to have purpose. And yes, sometimes people don't know what that is. People want, I'm looking for purpose. I'm looking for that click. I'm looking for the thing that snaps in with me. And organizations and leaders, as the emissaries, if you will, of the organization, have to say, this is what we do. This is what we do here in our group. Would you like to be part of that? If in the world of work, you happen to want those people to hang around for 5 or 6 years and just say, you know what? Or if you have a mismatch in values and they go, it doesn't make sense for me. Why am I here? I don't even know who these people are. So I think you're absolutely right on the money. You know, it has a lot to do with purpose, a tremendous amount of purpose. And these other things hopefully come with it. People collaboration, the leader's authentic. And that depends on a lot. There are a lot of people who operate from, I have to have my game face on today.
Yes.
You've seen these people. You know these people.
Oh, yes. Oh,
I have to have my game face on today. And the answer is, well, why don't you just be you?
yeah.
Why don't we start there? They can't figure out what the game face truth is as opposed to their own truth. And because they're trying to be this other person, this quote unquote part of the imposter syndrome. So it's so very, very important to me. So I'll tell you, we're getting close to the end. Okay? All right. So I'm going to let you have the last word.
Okay.
All right. So here's the question. What is your hope for the future? Where do you see you and your organizations and the beautiful donut and your work and your life? Where do you see that going in the future?
That's a great question. And I'll speak to my own personal practice as well in coaching because it is so much with leaders, and that what I hope to see is a continued emphasis on improving emotional intelligence in our leaders. And not so that leaders can show up better for their teams, but so that leaders are going to be able to minimize their burnout, their feeling that they are alone, their imposter syndrome, their feeling that they have to put this game face on and feel the crushing weight of the organization's expectations, as well as making decisions for other people's livelihoods. And I hope that so much. And I see this movement towards the human connectivity, this desire for connecting and support. And what I hope is that continues in a positive way, where leaders are able to connect with their colleagues over real issues that are going on in their lives, looking at that authenticity, as well as reaching out to support so that they don't feel so alone in their positions. I think we have lost so many fantastic leaders to leadership positions because they just didn't have the support that they needed. They didn't have the soft skills developed, but they also didn't have the support to develop them in the first place. And so that is my hope, is that leaders start to feel that weight come off their shoulders by just knowing that they're not alone in their struggles as leaders.
Well, that's a wonderful hope and a wonderful wish for the future. I'll tell you an interesting story. I had a guy named Ed Temple. He's a MCC qualified coach in Canada. He actually created an AI assistant named Enzo. He calls on Enzo to answer certain questions. So we're having this conversation. And I said, so Ed, what does this mean to you? Where we're going? He said, I think 75 to 80% of the redundant things we do will probably be handled by AI. He said, but that means the 20% of our humanness will become even more important.
Yes.
And I think that's absolutely right. A lot of the ability to articulate ideas when you don't have the words, kind of like the way I use AI. I'm kind of thinking of this. What do you think? And all of a sudden, boom, 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 you start this exchange and it takes you down a path. I would never have thought of that. And I love it. It's great. In the end, I think people want to connect with people.
Yes.
And I think it'll always be that way. I have a colleague named Chuck. Chuck has this incredible studio, and he's a speaker. He's a national, international speaker. And Chuck created this perfect avatar. You can't tell if this avatar is Chuck or the real Chuck.
Oh,
And I
wow.
went, I don't think I could do that because I want people to know it's me, for
Yes.
better or for worse.
Yeah.
Whether
Right.
they like it or not, it's me. That kind of a thing. Other forms of assistance to kind of get the point across. Anyway, Kimberly, this has been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate your time here this morning on the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. It's been a great delight. I absolutely wish you, Donut, and all the wonderful things you're doing for pediatric cancer survivors to go on forever. I wish you and your colleagues all the greatest, and your family all the greatest success in the future. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.